So you want to build some step treads, stair stringers, whatever you want to call them. I call them stair stringers. Step treads are, I guess, what you're putting your foot on, not what's supporting the board you're putting your foot on. But first thing you got to do is you got to figure out how many steps do you need. And to figure that out, you need to find out how big you want your steps to be, like width-wise, for your foot to sit on, and also how much height do you want the steps to rise in between. Code maximum is about 7.5 rise, and that's way too much. I tend to try and go around the 6 3/4 range for rise, usually even closer to 6.5. But the one I'm working with right here is about 5 feet off, and it's just supported roughly right now. I'll be putting in the permanent supports later. But so all I did was, I took and I measured from here down 6.5, and then I measured from there to the ground, and it came up with 46 and some odd inches, and I divided that by 6.5, and it ended up being 7.1 something. And so I knew that I was going to need 7 steps forward. But what I know is that because it was 7.15, I'm going to go ahead and add an eighth. Instead of doing 6.5, I'm doing 6 5/8 rise for each step. But I like to do them 10 as my run, because then I can put 2 deck boards on, and they're 11, so it gives me a little bit of overhang and a place to put a 1x as a riser kickboard on the back. So that works out just well. And so that leads us to, we come back over to our 2x12. And so knowing that we're only going to have 6 steps, usually you get about, and at least the way I do it, doing it about 6.5 and a run of 10, you get about 1 step per foot, per linear foot. So what I did is, instead of, because you can't buy 6 foot 2x12s, or maybe you can. If you can, you're probably overpaying. I went and I got a 12 foot 2x12. So that way I can get 2 out of them. Because this one, technically I think I could get away with doing 3, but I like to do 4, just to be a little bit of overkill. That way it will all be 16 on center. That's a 4 foot platform. But you can see I've already got my cut scribed on this one, but that's not what I'm showing you right now. This is what I've already been doing. I've got a little video showing me doing it, but what I want to show you is how to get started. So you take your framing square, you line it up on here. So we know we want to be 6.5 drop or 6 5/8 drop, and lined up with the corner. Hang on, forgive me, I'm doing this wrong. Here we go. So right in the corner here, we want to be 6 5/8. So there we go, 6 5/8. And then when we want this to intersect it, oh man, look at that, right at 10. And so then you'll take your pencil. This is going to be interesting with one hand. And you just hold that down. Forgive me, I'll bring you back when I'm done. But you go ahead and you mark this. And so now you got it marked. But you're like, well, that's not how a step starts. How am I going to do that? Well, so what you do then is you go and you take your board and you're like, well, I need the first one to be a 10-inch tread. And so you take and you line this up square with your mark. So you can see I've got a faint line there, and I can line this up with it. And believe it or not, if I have it dead in the end there, oh well, that's a little off. So dead in the corner there, we are right at 10 or just over. So I'm just going to cheat it up just a smidge. And then you can see we've got about an 1/8 inch gap on that line, and this line dead in the corner to 10 inches on the edge. And so then what you do from there is you come and you go square on this end. So you've got it square, because that's what you're going to cut off, so it'll go flush with your framing joist. All right, and so now what I do so I don't mess up my cuts is I go through here and I do X's to be like, this is what's getting removed. Sorry if you don't see that, my pencil needs sharpening. But then you go from there and you just move it to the next one down, and you do 6 5/8 drop and a 10-inch run. So we got 6 5/8 and 10, and you set your camera down because you're filming this, because you're saying you can do it better than me, which you probably can. And then you got it marked. And so then at this point, what I do is I cut that out. This gets cut out. I don't go and mark the whole thing. I cut that out, and in my other video, I just tossed this away because it's really only for the first one. But you cut that piece out, and then you put it on some piece of scrap 2x lumber. I like 2x6 because then you got an edge on each side. But you take this, and this becomes your jig. So you take your jig, wham, 6 5/8 fall, 10-inch run every time. So then you go and you mark your 6 steps. But the reason after I do the first one, I just take this and I toss it, is because if you use that on every single one you make, we aren't machines, we're imperfect. We're gonna have a different gap at this corner. It's not gonna be consistent. And so then you go put your stringers up and you're like, why are my boards not lining up quite right? It's because you have an inconsistent gap here. And so what you do is you cut your first one, you mark all 6 steps and you cut it, and you take it, make it your template. So I've got, this is my first one that I did. And so I've just got 3 screws in it because it's only 6 foot long. I mean, that's a screw every 3 feet, that's fine. And all I did was I take it and I lay it on top of the board, get it flush with the edge here. You get the idea. If you're watching this, you probably have an idea what you're doing. Even if you don't, I have faith in you as a human that you can figure it out from this point. That you just lay this on there, screw it with it flush with the edge, flush with the end here, then you just trace it and you go and you cut it. And in my, you'll see in my cutting video, I like to go cut, 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 and then come back, cut, 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 cut. So that way you don't have to go cut, 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 cut. That can be tedious and probably is a little bit more dangerous, changing direction all that much. But so like I said, this is gonna be the best way. You're gonna be consistent because you're using the same template for each of them. You're gonna have that much more consistency. Yeah, it might be a little bit off, but you're not gonna be near as off as you would be if you were just using your little jig piece for every single one of your stringers. So that's how like I said, I'm sure there's guys out there that probably do it better. You probably do it better, but I'm just doing this because I've seen people do it and I've seen people struggle, and I didn't realize how to do it, but this is kind of learning by trial and error and watching stuff online. So that's for you guys. Thanks.
Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to cut the stringers. I start at the top and I go down, cutting all in the same direction, and then I'll come back and do the same thing the opposite way. You can see I already cut the first step before I started this video, but now I go back in the other direction and just do them all in one go. I think that's the safest way. I was probably overreaching there a little bit, but it worked out all right. Now I'm just going in with a jigsaw to cut them out so I don't have any overcuts, and everything looks nice and consistent. Then I cut the little notch out for the 2x4 at the bottom. There it is. I set it to the side, throw the jig away, and then I line this up, put my board on top, And then I screw it in, because this is now my new template, and just get it flush. And then I take my pencil and I transfer my marks onto the board underneath, because this is going to give me the most consistent stringers. Like I said before, you could use the jig, but more than likely you're going to get your marks a little bit off, and then your step boards are going to show it, and it's going to look that way forever. It's going to be almost impossible to fix. So I use the jig for the first one and the first one only, and then I go and I do this, and see, I cut the same way as I did the first one, the same direction all the way down. And then the same direction all the way back up. This time I didn't lean out so bad. I actually moved with the board. I was about to say I needed to cut that piece off, but that made it pretty easy. Just go with the jigsaw. Obviously this is sped up, if y'all couldn't tell. I'm not that fast. I'm not super slow.